and welcome to this lesson for Advanced Higher Biology. This one is the first in Key Area 4 and we're going to be looking at coordination. So up until now, obviously we've been looking at proteins and membrane proteins and finishing off with the ion transport pumps. What we're going to be looking at now is cellular coordination and how all of those things can be pulled together to produce signals. So in this lesson, we're looking for you to understand the need and form of cell communications. You need to be able to explain the need for communication between cells. You need to be able to give examples of extracellular signaling molecules. You need to be able to explain how both signals and receptors are specific. And you need to be able to explain what we mean by a tissue-specific response. So you know by now that all multicellular organisms are made up of lots of different types of specialised cells, and that those specialised cells are responsible for carrying out different functions within defined areas of the body, and that those areas of the body are referred to as tissue. So our muscle cells, for example, make up muscle tissue, and that carries out specific functions. This means that multicellular organisms show what's referred to as a division of labour. So that just means that the work is passed around the different cell types of the body. Now these cells must be able to communicate with each other, so they must be able to receive information from other parts of the body and to be able to act upon it. In multicellular organisms, this sort of communication is achieved by either nerve transmission, so using the nerves to reach to every different part of the body, or by means of extracellular signaling molecules such as hormones. Now, steroid hormones, peptide hormones, and neurotransmitters are all examples of extracellular signaling molecules and will be affected depending on which cell it is that they are targeting. So one tissue in a body will be releasing this signaling molecule, so this could be our steroid hormone or peptide hormone or a neurotransmitter. That will travel through the blood vessels until it reaches the target cells. When it reaches the target cells, it will be able to bind to complementary receptors, so those are proteins on the outside of the cells, and that's allowing our signals to be passed from one cell to another. Now the receptor molecules of our target cells are proteins, and they have the binding site for a specific signal molecule. That binding is going to change the conformation, so changing the shape of the receptor protein, and that will initiate a specific response within the cell. So as we've discussed previously, our hormone in this example is acting as a ligand to bind to our protein and change its conformation in order to stimulate some kind of specific response. Now different cell types can produce specific signals, and they can only be detected and responded to by cells with a specific receptor. However, in a multicellular organism, different cell types may show a specific response to the same signal depending on the tissue that they're a part of. If we look at this example, we have the hormone adrenaline, and it's targeting specific receptor proteins either in the cells in the mammalian mammary gland or the cell in the mammalian liver. In the salivary gland, when our adrenaline molecule binds to a receptor protein, it releases amylase, the enzyme which is going to help to break down starch. However, when it binds to our protein in the mammalian liver cells, that releases a response which starts the breakdown of glycogen so that we can release blood glucose back into the bloodstream. So in this way, signaling molecules can have different effects on different cell types, and that's due to the differences in the intracellular signaling molecules and the pathways that are involved. So we have the same extracellular signal, so coming from outside the cell. However, the intracellular response, the signals that happen from the receptor onwards into the rest of the cell, are different. So you should be able to explain that cells need to be able to communicate with each other in order that information can be passed on from one part of the body to another. You should be able to give examples of extracellular signaling molecules, such as steroid hormones, peptide hormones, or neurotransmitters. You need to be able to explain that signals and receptors are specific, that signals are produced by specific cells, and can only bind to their target receptors, which will only be present on certain cells. And that a tissue-specific response simply means that one signal can create a different response in different tissues. So both of the tissues will have cells containing the correct receptor molecules, however the response of that cell to that signal molecule will be different.